Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 293 for the 1st of June 2014. Another month goes by. The 1st of June. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia, trying a new system this week for recording this intro. I've got a really nice Sennheiser microphone I've had for a while that I used to use in making videos, which I've retrieved from the cupboard. Hooked it up to my Zoom microphone, which I normally use to do the intros. I'm standing now in the middle of my lounge dining room with the microphone on a large cat post and then sort of sitting inside a big old cup. Yeah, and I'm standing here with my laptop in my arm so I can read my notes. Visualize that. Visualize that. Or you don't have to visualize that. I mean, if you don't want to. I think I better tell you what's coming up on this week's show. More from Eran Segev and his recent trip to QED in Manchester. Question, explore, discover. One of the premier skeptical, scientific sort of reason conventions in the world, I must say. This week, Eran chats to Nate Phelps. Now, he's an interesting man. He's the son of Fred Phelps, the late Fred Phelps from the Westboro Baptist Church. They're the people who still, as far as I know, protest things. God hates fags signs. You've probably seen those on the news and on the internet. God hates this, God hates that. So Nate Phelps, the son of Fred Phelps, left that whole religious scene quite some time ago. And I think you'll find this interview very interesting indeed to find out what it was like from his point of view, from Nate's point of view, growing up in this sort of environment. And also we find out what he's doing now. After that, it's a week in science from our good friends at the Royal Institution of Australia, www.riaus.org.au. And for all those people who went to the Science of Doctor Who, which was travelling around the country, I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as I do. Thank you, RiAus and BBC. Then after that, I travel up to the Blue Mountains just west of Sydney for the day to do some filming for the Vaccination Chronicles. And thank you, Joe Alabaster, our new reporter Joe Alabaster, for helping me out on the day, being behind the scenes on the camera, helping me with the script. And thank you to Peter Ratbags Bowditch, who was also there, who I interviewed. Now, after all the filming's done, we find a nice veranda and a nice old hotel and have a chat about the Blue Mountains and what it's like to live there and certain vaccination issues and what it's like to try to film. I must say I've had a little bit of I've had my share of a few unlucky things going on lately trying to film with noises going off and unfavourable lighting conditions and me forgetting my script, and we're getting there though. We're getting there, folks. Then to round off the show, something completely different but very worthwhile listening to, Maynard's spooky action. Maynard's going to be talking to Dr Peter Davies about eye health and macular degeneration. Not quite a skeptical topic. Okay, yes, I'll grant you that, but really interesting and really good advice. Dr. Peter Davies will give you really good advice about a very simple check you can do to test your eye health. So let's put this one in the category of good science, good scientifically based medicine in action. That's to round off the show. Please visit www.skeptics.com.au to find out more about our upcoming convention in November with the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. Dick Smith, Dr. Reggie, Dr. Carl Kruszelnicki, a cast of thousands. Tickets are on sale. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to catching up to a lot of my friends at the amazing meeting in Las Vegas. It'll be so great to see James Randi once again. And thank you for those people who do help the Skeptic Zone by chipping in via micropayments on PayPal. And if you want, I'll put a link on the Skeptic Zone page at www.skepticzone.tv. I've put a few of my photographs of origami up on Instaprints. Instaprints, like Instagram, Instaprints, where you can purchase a framed copy of some of my money foldings and things like that. Well, if you're interested, you can check that out. And of course, all proceeds go to help the Skeptic Zone podcast. Well, that's all from me at the moment. Since I'm downstairs anyway, there's no point in me running even further downstairs. Ooh, what's this? This is a big jar of couscous. Haven't had that for a while. Why not? While I heat up and cook and do whatever you do with couscous, I think it's good with a bit of chili sauce. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Grain of salt, grain of salt, grain of salt.
Let's all take this with a grain of salt. Here's Eran Segev.
Grain of salt now, grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
So I'm here with Nate Phelps. Nate is known to many skeptics as the survivor of the Westboro Baptist Church. And son of, sorry, I had to say it that way.
Yeah.
And son of the late Fred Phelps. I would like to first ask you about how you enjoy QED here and what your impression is so far.
Wet? No. Actually, I like it a lot. I love the people, the accent. I'm a people watcher. So I sit in the bar and I watch people go by, and it's interesting that you see certain British characters. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but certain looks that are very British.
Bowler hats?
No, not that. I'm talking about like facial features and like there's a lot of the tall, what do they call them, gingers.
Yeah.
And just a lot of the stereotype ideas that I have about the British, and I see them in the people, right? But other than that, this is nothing like I thought it would be. I mean, you see some of the old British look out on the street, but this is a very metropolitan country now compared to what you typically think, eh?
Yeah.
Or I typically think.
So have you had a lot of discussions here with different people?
Yeah.
So
and found out a lot of differences. Like I have to actually go to the bar to get a beer instead of the waitress coming to the table. That's just not right.
You know, in Australia, you can't buy alcohol in a supermarket.
You can.
No, you cannot. You cannot. There's specialized shops called bottle shops.
See that? Actually, Canada's that way too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but England's not. See,
No.
England's the one that started all this nonsense, and then they renege and they leave it up to us. All these
Deal with all the alcohol.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Canada. So you now live in Canada, but you're not originally from.
No, I'm from the States.
Yeah.
Born and raised in Topeka, where the church is, and spent 25 years in Southern California, and then moved up to Canada in December of 2005.
So moving to Canada in December, that's quite brave. But apart from that, apart from that, so you grew up in the U.S. In the I don't know whether famous or infamous or both is the correct term, but Phelps family. You were one of 13, if I remember correctly.
13, yeah.
So would you care to tell me a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, it's impossible to encapsulate it all in a short period of time. So I would say that it was intense, it was dogmatic, and it was violent, both physically and psychologically. Of course, you don't know that growing up there. It just was what it was. But when you have that many children running around, and then my father, for all of his faults, was a very energetic person. He was constantly coming up with new ideas and new things that he wanted to do, and then he would inscript the kids. So, for instance, he was he got really sick because he had let himself go and his weight was high, and he came back from some trip and ended up in the hospital. So he comes out of the hospital and suddenly he's on a mission to get healthy again. And that translated to, at that time I think it would have been about 10 of us. 10 kids and my mom and my dad, and we're out running around the local high school track 10 miles a night within 2 or 3 months. So that it was that kind of, anything he did, it was manic and it was extreme, and so that's kind of how we learned about the world we were in.
But you mentioned in an earlier discussion that we had that you actually went to a public school.
Yeah, it's interesting because my father had such control over the family and the church. At least this is how I look at it now, because a lot of people express surprise that we weren't cloistered, we weren't homeschooled, and all that kind of stuff. It just was never an issue. But what he did do is he reached out to the schools and he made darn sure that they weren't doing anything he didn't want them to do. So, like, when I was in grade school, if they were still doing like Christmas carols and having events in the classrooms surrounding Christmas time, and my father, we didn't celebrate Christmas, so he saw to it that every time they were going to do anything Christmassy, that they had to first remove any Phelps kids from the classroom and send us down to the library, and they did what they did, and we went back into the class.
Why did you not celebrate Christmas? I'm not asking you for the reason. I'm asking you for the excuse.
No, yeah. It seems to me like it was his. The Bible didn't charge us to celebrate his birth, but rather his death. That was kind of it had its roots in paganism and that kind of stuff. So that was the reasons that he gave, that we weren't supposed to be celebrating the birth of Christ. And I'm not sure if that's true or not. If you read the Bible properly,
I've stopped at the end of the Old Testament, so
that's right. You don't even have access to it.
I don't have access to the New Testament. Not allowed to open that book.
That's right.
But this sounds like there was definitely a different kind of theology involved here, and there's two things I would like you to perhaps tell me a little bit more about. First of all, about how that theology reflected on you. What did you actually know, and what was simply part of the environment? And the other thing I wanted to know is more around the relationship between the Phelps family and Westbrook Baptist Church, in terms of is it just one and the same, or are there extensions to that? Is it just the mommy, daddy, and 13 kids, or is it more than that? If you could.
Yeah. Well, let me talk on that first, and we'll go back so I can get clarity on that first question. The whole time I was growing up there, it was primarily my family, and then there was two smaller families. One was the Hockenbergers. No, really, seriously, Hockenbergers. And
okay.
And the other family was the Davises, and the Hockenbergers had 3 kids, Davises had 4. So that was it. That was 7, 8, 9, 11. There was about 25 people in that church on a typical Sunday. From time to time, people would come and go. It didn't last very long. Folks would oftentimes. Someone would show up for the morning service and we never saw them again. They would be driving by and they'd see the sign and decide to check it out. And I remember on more than one occasion the old man get this kind of wry grin on his face when someone new would come in, and he would make a show of taking his sermon that he was going to preach and putting it in the pulpit and then pulling out his hellfire and brimstones and basically scare them off, right? And he was going to hit them with both barrels, and then if they didn't stick around, they weren't legit anyway, right? So we were pretty much, the church was the Phelps family. The church was Fred Phelps, really.
Yeah. So the perhaps the second question, but I would be very interested to follow that up with what's going to happen now. But let's first.
So what was the first question again?
About theology. About
what were we taught?
So I mean, obviously, your father had his own peculiar theology. The question is, how much of it was simply part of the environment? Almost, I would call it cultural, and how much was consciously religious in the sense of you were aware of the reasoning behind it, you were aware of what the intent was. Mm-hmm. So how much of it was really religious and how much of it was just part of your day-to-day life?
On Sundays, it was 100% religious, and my father was very serious about teaching everyone in that church what the Bible had to say. So he would spend hours, and he would get into the nuances and parsing the meaning of that word or this word, and was very particular about how then we behaved and expressed that in our lives. Right. For instance, I talk about his interpretation of the word for long. We're talking about women's hair, and I believe it's in 1 Corinthians. He said that word was improperly translated. It should actually be translated as uncut. So women just didn't cut their hair. So those kind of details were strictly adhered to. But what was very interesting was once we got out of the church, and it was Monday morning, then I was struck often by how ineffective we were at adhering to the doctrines, so to speak, that we were taught on Sundays. My father had a mouth on him, and that was an issue that we were taught as kids. You don't use certain words. He had no qualms about doing that. He had no qualms about treating people a certain way, and to me that was part and parcel of what being a Christian was. And there certainly were plenty of passages he may not have spent a lot of time stressing, but they were there about how you treated people, right? So there was, from the very beginning, once I was at an age of awareness and being able to look and say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't fit, there was a lot of hypocrisy between the words and the actions, right? So he was very sincere about getting it right doctrinally. But there was a curious disconnect in how he applied it in the way he behaved in the real world.
And he's, as most listeners would know, he's passed away recently, a few weeks ago.
Yeah, the 19th of March.
Yeah. So, and this is something we've discussed a couple of nights ago, and asked you about grief.
Yeah.
And obviously, he was your father. I mean, regardless of the long disconnect and the fact that you disagreed on probably more than you would have agreed on. Yeah. He was your father. And how was your response? How did you feel about that?
Well, when you decide to leave that church, you are ostracized. You're cut off. So, effectively, on my 18th birthday or soon thereafter, I no longer had a family. I had a brother, but the lion's share of my family was cut off. So, at first you go through a process of saying, well, not really. We can make this work out and that kind of stuff. And then you get to a point in your life when you realize, no, this isn't coming back. It's not going to happen. So, somewhere in that first 10 years or so, I went through a deliberate process of mourning the loss of my family, because that, in fact, is what I had experienced, right? And so I can point to that, and then I also point to just the passage of time, and I don't know if it's you get it calloused or whatever, but somehow you can start to let go of those feelings and those needs, that desire to be connected. So I was convinced when he passed, there wasn't going to be any emotions. It was simply going to be an event that came and went. There was a little bit. again, I think it's, when you say he was your father, I struggle with that a little bit because I'm not quite sure what that means. I think that it means something to the person that says it.
Yeah.
But to say he was my father, so he was there when certain things happened, or he was there. He was someone I turned to for advice and for inspiration and all that kind of stuff. Those are the kind of things that we mean when we say he was your father, right? And I didn't have any of that, so the emotion was more about recognizing intellectually that there's something that I could have had that I didn't, and mourning that. But other than that, there really hasn't been that much.
And what was the public response? I mean, you must have. I mean, you're a prominent public speaker. You're right. You're in CFI Canada. But how did the public respond to you, and not directly to you?
Well, directly to me, the overwhelming majority of it was support and kindness and well wishes and that kind of thing. There were some places that I went that weren't, I had to go searching for it, where there was, as I would expect, a lot of bitterness and a lot of anger and recrimination towards my father, and I understand that. I don't, people talking about spitting on his grave and that kind of stuff. I understand the anger. I can't condone it because I don't think it's best for the people who are experiencing it, to be honest with you. So, but by and large, it was very positive for me. I didn't. There wasn't anything that was shocking that I came across as far as what people had to say about it.
And what's going to happen to Westboro Baptist Church now?
I don't know.
Have you been in touch with them, by the way?
None of them that are there. I tried to when I found out he was sick, and that didn't work out. But their public image is that we don't worship the dead. This has happened, and we move on. There's some evidence that he was kicked out of the church, so they may have already emotionally disconnected from him long before he passed.
So would one of your brothers take over? Or?
Well, I'm not sure who's going to take over. There's a group of 8 men who are on a board of elders that was just recently formed in the last year or two, and they apparently are heading things up. It could end up being Steve Drain, who's one of the more public figures in the picket campaign. I know that they have muzzled Shirley, and she would never have been able to be a leader anyway. But they've taken it a step further and actually silenced her. Shirley's my sister, who has been the public persona of the Westboro campaign for years. I mean, other than Fred Phelps, everybody talked about Shirley Phelps Roper, and because in fact she was that next generation of the angry, vitriolic, face screwed up in anger at the world. And a lot of folks thought she would be the next leader, right? And I would tell them, no, she can't, because she's a woman.
She's a woman,
yeah. So the evidence now is that at some point in the last couple of years that they deliberately took action to silence her, to put her in her place, if you will. And so now it's Steve Drain or my brother Tim seem to be the two that are most likely to head the church.
I see. Okay. Now, let's move on a little bit.
All right.
Because you have left that church more than a few weeks ago.
Yep.
And you have done a few things
Just
since
a few.
then. 1 or 2.
A few I'm not proud of, but yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about the things that you are proud of. Okay. So let's cut right to the present day. You have a role in CFI Canada. Mm-hmm. What is that role?
Yeah, CFI Canada started like 6 years ago, and we have, I want to say 10 branches now. And I run the Calgary branch. I'm the executive director of CFI Calgary, Calgary. And we have speakers, and we do events for the community. And we've made quite a presence for ourselves there in the last 4 years since I started doing that. And I also serve on the board of directors for a group called Recovering from Religion, which is what it sounds like. It's like people get together much like the AA format. They'll meet at someone's home or at some location, and they use each other to help process and deal with their journey away from some destructive religious experience that they've been in. And then I go around and speak all over North America and now I can say and Europe. So, yeah, good stuff.
And you're also campaigning on issues that are not directly related to skepticism, but are somewhat related to your history.
I speak a lot at LGBT events that support LGBT groups. I speak out, I write about it, and advocate for LGBT rights in North America. Of course, Canada, it's legal there to get married, but just below us, the U.S. is still fighting that battle. So, a lot of opportunity in that area.
And since you are active in the promotion of LGBT rights, I'm just wondering whether you've ever encountered a non-religious argument against LGBT rights.
I can say I have not. In fact, there was Proposition 8 trial in California when...
Maybe this is for an Australian audience, so perhaps you could just describe
Proposition 8 was a ballot initiative in California to make gay marriage, basically make it impossible, make it a constitutional amendment that only a man and woman can get married.
But that's to the Constitution of the state, not the Constitution of the United States. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's probably also important to note, for those who don't know, that in the United States, citizens can actually put on the ballot in the state elections propositions that should then become law.
Will carry the weight of law.
Yeah.
Typically, a lot of those then have to be vetted by some legal challenge because oftentimes the way it's written, the language of that proposition is not going to withstand some legal challenge. So, but nevertheless, it's an important tool in the election process in the states. So this proposition was put on the ballot, ended up being funded in large part by the Mormon Church, and it passed narrowly. So then it went, it became a legal battle, and the trial lawyer or the trial judge in that trial basically got to hear all of the popular arguments against gay marriage as part of the evidence that was presented at the trial. And in his written decision, where he overturned Proposition 8, he said that he basically defeated each one of those arguments for lack of evidence. Arguments such as it's not good for the children, that marriage is primarily for reproduction, that homosexuality is a choice. All these arguments that are out there that were supposed to be the justifications, never mind what the Bible says, they were soundly defeated, and what he wrote in his decision is like a study in how to respond to all the popular arguments against gay marriage. So there's nothing out there. And he concluded, rightfully so, that really what you're left with then is just a lot of people who just don't feel good about it because of some religious belief that they hold. And that's not how we make law in America. So now you can get married in California.
Is this the kind of thing that could be challenged by go to the Supreme Court, or it isn't?
I think they did try, and ultimately the Supreme Court rejected hearing it. It did go to the appellate level and was upheld, and and then they tried to get it before the Supreme Court, and they rejected. So it's settled.
It is settled.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay. So. Nate, thank you very much for giving me some of your time. It was a pleasure meeting you and speaking to you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure too, Eran. Thank you much.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
AstronomyCast takes a facts-based journey through the cosmos as it offers listeners weekly discussions on astronomical topics ranging from planets to cosmology. Hosted by Fraser Kane of Universe Today and myself, Dr. Pamela Gay of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, this show brings the questions of an avid astronomy lover directly to an astronomer. Together, Fraser and I explore what is known and being discovered about the universe around us. Join us each week as we take a facts-based journey through the cosmos at astronomycast.com.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. When winter comes, I crank up the heat and wrap myself in warm clothes, but men don't seem to do the same. So why is it that women feel the cold more than men? One theory is that women have a higher core body temperature than men. This would create a bigger difference between our internal temperature and the outside ambient temperature, which makes us more sensitive to the cold. But scientific evidence for this is a bit shaky, with some studies finding a difference and others not. Overall, it seems that women could have a slightly higher core temperature, but we're only talking about 0.2 degrees difference. When you take into account other factors that change how people feel the cold, like age, fitness, hunger, and tiredness, this difference is really insignificant. So if core body temperature isn't a factor, then what's happening? Well, it turns out that women have a lower skin temperature than men, meaning that we feel the cold more. Women tend to have a higher skin surface area to volume ratio because we're generally smaller overall. To stop too much heat loss through this surface area, we have a lower flow of blood to the skin, leading to a lower skin temperature. This means that it takes a much smaller drop in temperature for our skin sensors to detect that we're feeling cold. Women's bodies also seem to be better at moving warm blood away from our extremities to protect internal organs. That's why our hands and feet can be 3 degrees cooler than men's. And it seems counterintuitive, but our extra layers of fat actually insulate our skin from our warm core, creating the sensation of coldness. That's also why larger people tend to feel the cold more. And now, 4 fast facts about our body temperatures. Women need to get much hotter than men before they start to sweat, and even then they sweat much less, which is probably linked to testosterone levels. Your body temperature cycles up and down by a degree or so throughout the day, being lowest a couple of hours before you wake up and highest in the late afternoon. Our definition of a normal temperature came in 1851 from German physician Karl Wunderlich, who took armpit readings from 25,000 patients. And pregnancy and hormonal contraceptives can increase a woman's core temperature by 1 degree Celsius. That's it for this week in science. If you want to find out more about why women are cool and men are hot, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Plus, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Kieran Groom, and we'll catch you next week.
On Maynard.com.au. AU. Coming to you live from the exciting Glebe Point Road Frou Frou Cafe, it's Mr. Tim Ferguson.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and all the times in between.
My name's Maynard. We've got it all here. We've got dogs, we've got screaming babies, we've got pouting waiters. I've heard that ghosts can only travel in straight lines and they can't jump. I know with Feng Shui, there's usually a mirror or something, and so the evil can't turn and get into your house, so you put something there. Well, what have you heard about ghosts and their physical ability?
I do
do know that they cannot jump. They won't jump. They refuse to jump.
So they're actually recalcitrant. That's their problem.
After a lifetime of jumping, you don't want to spend the afterworld being asked repeatedly, come on, jump over that. If you can walk through walls, why would you want to jump?
There seem to be a set of rules that are a bit grey there.
One is ghost-gasms. Do they happen? I mean, I don't want to be finding myself in the afterworld where there is no orgasm. There is no point in being alive without orgasms and daytime TV. I want both of those in the afterworld.
On Maynard.com.au. AU.
Glorious blue mountains. Katoomba. I'm in Katoomba. I'm with Joe Alabaster. Hello, Joe Alabaster.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I want some more evidence, please. And Peter Bowditch. Hello.
Hello.
Now, I've come up here, and you've both been helping me today filming the Vaccination Chronicles, bits of it. And I'm pleased to say that it's almost, all the filming's almost done now. And we had an interesting morning, Joe. We filmed about half of it when we had to film it all again. But you were very patient with me fluffing my lines, I must say.
It made me feel a little bit better about me fluffing my lines for my segment on the Skeptic Zone, frankly. It was fantastic.
And then, it's a very serious topic. I mean, I was doing all these lines about childhood diseases and people, having... It was very serious stuff, and then I was looking up... I'd fluff a line, then you'd look at me, and then you'd start to smirk behind the camera, and I'd lose the plot. But this is all part of filming, I think.
It was actually a lot of fun. I did enjoy it.
I'm pleased.
I always thought it was the job of the camera person and the microphone person to try and make the talent laugh while they were supposed to be being serious. I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen them doing crazy antics while I'm trying to keep a straight face while talking to camera.
And we've that was in a park, and then we came here to the, what is it?
It's the Carrington.
The Carrington, a famous old hotel here in Katoomba. We're sitting out here on the, was it the balcony, the veranda? The veranda. And another thing that occurred to me, and I always forget this, but I always remember again when I'm filming, is you start to do something to camera, and then a plane comes, and then the dog barks, and then the truck decides to go up the hill, and then another train comes along. And even now, we've just finished filming a segment with Peter, and about 2 minutes later, this music appears from nowhere.
Buskers with drums.
Down on the street. But it's all part of filming. And you were relating a story, Peter, which you can tell our listeners now, and give them a sneak preview about. We were talking about a time when polio was a real menace in our society, and you were telling us a story about kids hurting their legs.
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to remember when polio was a dreadful scare. My cousin, Philip, who was a couple of years younger than me, he fell over one day and hurt his leg. His parents panicked because first thought anybody's mind, polio. Took him to the doctor, he was okay. 2 days later, his very best friend Frank, who lived 2 streets away, same experience, fell over, hurt his leg. His parents took him to the doctor, he had polio. Frank died in 2012, he spent his life in a wheelchair. People forget how bad these diseases were because they haven't seen them. I've seen people in iron lungs. I've seen children in my primary school class where we had to modify our games because they had calipers on their legs. I don't want to ever see this stuff come back.
Yeah.
And no, we can be thankful now that they found the answer to some of these things. They've got rid of these dreadful diseases, that they no longer are a problem. Polio, in fact, because it's only carried by humans, can be wiped out in the way that smallpox was. And hopefully we'll do it. It was supposed to be wiped out in 2003.
Yes,
but it keeps coming back. And at the moment it's really only bad in 2 countries. But the trouble is they're 2 countries which have refugees coming out of them into other parts of the world. So hopefully we'll never see it come back the way it ever did. But we can only be a year away. If we stop vaccinating now, and we still get polio vaccination in Australia, if we were to stop it now, we could have epidemics of polio back in Australia and the United States within a year.
Yeah. I wouldn't at all be surprised if that could happen.
And it's a disease with lasting consequences. So it's not something that you get and you either get over it or you're sick while you get it. It's something which can affect you for life. It can cause you paralysis of your lungs, which is why the iron lungs were there.
You and I, years ago, were in Melbourne for a skeptical event at the Melbourne Museum.
The Science Week. We're at
Science Week, and we were both there on the Victorian Skeptics had a stand, I remember. And at some stage during the proceedings, you and I ducked away and had a look at the museum, and we found in a museum an iron lung.
Yeah, they actually had an exhibition of specifically about polio. They had an iron lung, which had been donated by somebody and the thing had been painted up in red and black because the person who was in it was a follower of the Essendon football team, and his parents had painted it up in his football team colours, and the football team had contributed to the cost of running it. But they had leg calipers and all sorts of things in this exhibition.
But it was such a poignant moment to think that we had to go to a museum to see an iron lung, and these things were once just part of everyday life almost, or the society knew about them.
I didn't learn to swim when I was a child, and there were whole cohorts of children didn't learn to swim because swimming pools were seen as a place where polio would spread, and so parents wouldn't take their children to public swimming pools. And so we had for several years, if you wanted to learn to swim, you had to go to a private pool somewhere, or maybe you could go to the beach, but you could not go to the public swimming pools, or you could, but nobody did because of this fear.
That's astonishing. Things that you don't even think about. Now, you've got a couple of young kids who I just met today for the first time. They're delightful. Oscar is such a chatterbox. He's lovely.
Oscar is 4 and Daphne is 3 years old.
They're both absolutely delightful kids, but as a mum of some young kids yourself, and when you hear these stories, and I know that when I was doing my lines to camera, and when you weren't smirking, which we did, I have to admit, we were
giggles.
We got the giggles, but you do when you're filming. But I could look at the look on your face when I was delivering some lines about. There was an article I read about whooping cough, and a child coughing and breaking their neck. And I could see the look on your face.
It's difficult. I mean, before having children, I was rather affected by these things anyway. But, it's maybe a bit more personal now. It's really hard.
Your kids were born up here?
Yes, they were actually, and that was one of my worries, I'll admit, having children in the Blue Mountains, because I was quite aware of the low vaccination rates up here. Particularly when they were under 6 months and not fully immunised for whooping cough. It was quite terrifying.
Did you have anybody putting any sort of information, your anti-vaccination information your way being up here, or was it...
Well, no, I was already very much pro-vax, have been throughout my life, actually, because when I was a child, I knew a chap who had polio and wasn't an iron lung, which is a bit of a rarity.
Wow.
But, I have come across anti-vax people. None of them have really tried to bring it up with me. I don't know if it's because they know that I'm an advocate for vaccination up here. But I had a falling out with somebody in my mother's group who was very much insistent that Merrill Dorey's views... specifically Meryl Dorey's views, should be heard, and that there are two sides to the story. And we had a little bit of awkwardness in our mother's group after that. Also, my son one of his best friends is from a family that doesn't vaccinate, and that's a very strange thing to negotiate socially, really. I want him to have his friendships and such, so we just tend not to speak about it. The other family is aware of my position and why I hold it, and I'm aware of theirs and why they hold it, and it's civil.
So you're both residents of this area up in the Blue Mountains. What is it about this area? I mean, it's got a reputation for being a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for, alternative, hippie-ish?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I am actually, again, I'm also old enough to actually have been a real, genuine hippie, which is probably why I ended up in the Blue Mountains. I don't know. It's obviously a lifestyle thing. I mean, we've got the Winter Magic Festival coming up shortly, where our local witches will come out into the street and cast spells on people and so forth. But it's interesting that I haven't actually seen any overt anti-vaccination activity here, and I've been living here for 5.5 years. But this postcode we're in now, 2780, is the second lowest rate of vaccination of any postcode in Australia.
What's the first, do you know?
Ballina.
Ballina?
I think it's Ballina.
Ballina. Yeah, I know Ballina.
On the northern rivers. And there's a reason for that. That is in an area where there is an highly active anti-vaccination organisation running.
I used to go to Sunday school camp in Ballina. Oh, many years ago.
We won't talk about Sunday school, Richard, although I'll throw stones at us. I don't know, I haven't seen it, but certainly up here, I joke about being the gluten-free capital of the world. It's food fads everywhere.
Yeah.
There's
crystals and things.
Oh, crystals are everywhere.
Yep.
So we've got shops with crystals.
We're right near the main street. Just looking down from our view here on the veranda of the Carrington, I can see the main street. I'm sure there are crystal shops and all sorts of things down there.
There are many crystals. In fact, when Richard was talking before about the music that started up,
still going.
It was the very first thing was one of those Indian drums that people tap on the ends of if you're doing your Hare Krishna stuff. So yes, it's an alternative lifestyle place, which also was the case with the Northern Rivers of New South Wales.
Yes.
It was a tree change place. People retired and went up there.
Yeah.
Nimbin was there. Nimbin probably now is nothing like it was back in the olden days, but I think it was compulsory to smoke weed when you went to Nimbin, or they threw you out of the town when I last went there. I left quickly because obviously I wouldn't do anything illegal. So I think that's part of it. The area has attracted people.
Yeah.
Because there is a certain lifestyle to the area.
And it's away from Sydney. Yeah. But, I came up here on the train this morning from Sydney and it took me less than 2 hours and I was here. It's not a long trip at all, really.
It's not a long trip for someone that lives in Sydney. And it's an awfully long trip if you live in France or somewhere like that.
Well, there you go.
I keep reading novels where people say they have to travel first class to go from Geneva to Bern because it's an hour and a half in the train. I thought, we do that to go to work here.
Oh, the train was quite comfortable in purple seats, Jo.
Oh, excellent.
Almost as purple as your hair today, I must say.
That's our new renovated trains, the ones with the purple seats.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, we actually tweet about that when we get purple seats.
Yep.
I saw that. Jo, what's your tweet handle, Jo?
It's at Jo Alabaster, one word.
And Ratbag?
It's at ratbags.com, also one word.
And your website, of course, is?
Ratbags.com, but that's got a dot in it, not the word D-O-T.
You've been doing ratbags.com for years, even before I met you. 15 years, eh?
It started in March 1999. And the original idea was to simply list 1,000 places I didn't like.
That's right.
And so the idea was, and actually I did. I ticked over on the 31st December 1999 when the world was about to end, and
again,
I added the 1,000th person there. Some significant things: the Australian Vaccination Network was number one. Pat Robertson's Crazy Christian Coalition, by remarkable coincidence, came in at number 666. But I started basically just this list of websites.
Yeah.
And then I started adding comments to it, and then I started to become a magazine.
Yes.
And then become an absolute pain in the neck like all these things do, because you've got to keep doing it all the time.
You do. It's like the Skeptic Zone, really. You have to do it every week. And looking on down there on the steps, I can see a couple of little kids. Oh, they've gone. It's all right. You can come up now. Oscar. Here they come.
I should point out that I'm only joking about it being a pain because I receive hate mail, but I also receive a lot of complimentary stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
And if I wasn't getting the people looking at it, I wouldn't bother doing it. But I do get the response. I get several thousand people that come and look at it. It's worth doing. All I'd like to do is figure out how I can make a living doing it.
Oh, well, that's the question we all ask. Now these two kids have come back up. Come up. Come on. It's hello. What's that? What's that?
You going to say hello, Duff?
Can you say hello?
No.
You say hello. See that big blue one? You say hello to that. Say hello.
It's a microphone, miss.
No, she's listening. She put her ear up and she was, Oscar, come over. Do you want to say hello, Oscar? This is like never work with children and animals because the chatterbox Oscar is now gone shy. Do you want to say hello, Oscar?
You want to say hello?
Say hello.
Hello.
There we are. Oh. We got something. Do you want to say hello? Say hello.
Hi.
You don't have to touch it. Just say in your big voice, hello.
No. Go on, sorry.
Isn't that always the way? But she's absolutely adorable. What lovely big blue eyes. She's looking up at me. And, of course, and you've got blue eyes too. And, of course, she's fully vaccinated.
They are both fully vaccinated. I actually had Oscar's chickenpox was done slightly early because there was an outbreak in the area. So I had him done 6 months before schedule, which is acceptable by the GP standards. So, yeah, there was an outbreak in the area, and I was a bit concerned.
Oh, she's just adorable. Well, thanks, everybody. It was a great day of filming. We had a few stops and starts, and we feared we lost all the audio at one stage, but it was all good in the end. And, pretty soon now I hope to have that documentary unleashed on the world to get up the noses of the anti-vaxxers everywhere.
Oh. That's always a good day when you annoy an anti-vaxxer, I reckon.
This is Jay Novella from the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. Did you know that there are thousands of skeptical reports, interviews, and investigations going back to 1981, free to download? Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. Click the publications link and enjoy almost every back issue of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian skeptics. You can also subscribe online and get the latest digital or hard copy of this, the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. That's www.skeptics.com.au or just Google Australian Skeptics.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
I'm speaking with Dr Peter Davies for Macular Degeneration Awareness Week. What is your specialty, Dr Davies?
I'm a retinal surgeon, which means that I do surgery on the retina, on the macula, on the back of the eye. As well as that, I do a lot of cataracts and pterygiums and other types of surgeries that people understand is associated with eyes.
Now, can I ask you what attracted you to that area of medicine? What made you specialise in that area?
I was in the UK at the time, and it's usually doctors you have the opportunity of working with. There was a fairly inspirational doctor called Dr Robert Johnson, and I watched him doing retinal surgeries, and I thought, wow, this is a great thing to do.
Look, when I think of the retina, I think of it something that if it's damaged you can't normally fix, but you can obviously do a lot with it that I am ignorant of.
Yes, you can. If you think of the eye as a golf ball with a lens at the front and a lens in the middle, and then think of the back of the golf ball, that's where the retina is. So the retina is like the film in your camera. It captures the light and sends the signals to the brain. And the retina has a central part in it called the macula. So we can do several things with the retina. We can treat macular disease, and we can also reattach the retina. Sometimes the retina lifts away from the back of the eye. That's what we call a retinal detachment, and we can put that back with surgery.
Is there something, there's the holy grail of retina surgery that can't yet be done, but you'd hope one can be one day?
Oh, I think we all want to be able to get into the genetic code of the cells at the back of the eye and reprogram the genetics, because the problem with macular degeneration is partly a genetic breakdown. The cells just stop working the way they were designed to do, and there's been lots of research over 20 years or more, as long as I've been doing ophthalmology, to try and get in and replace or repair or change the genetics in the cells at the back of the eye.
Is the reason for this because the eye wasn't designed to last as long as we live now?
Yes, several theories. Certainly, the eye has very good protective mechanisms built into it. For instance, UV light from the sun or from welding, that gets absorbed in the very front layer of the eye. But the blue frequencies of light do carry a lot of energy. Now, some of that light gets absorbed in the lens. As you get older, the lens becomes a bit yellow. And then in the macula, there is actually proteins that absorb the high energy. And when we ask patients to take lutein as a vitamin supplement, we think that helps to increase the pigments in the macula. But really, eyes do wear out with age, and that's the fundamental problem of macular degeneration.
So it is usually genetic, but is there anything we can do throughout our life to avoid damage to the macula?
Yeah, there certainly is. As you point out, you can't change your genes, you can't change your parents, but you can limit your risk. The first thing is to avoid cigarette smoke. That's really, really important. Cigarette smoke contains toxins that harm the protective mechanisms at the back of the eye. And if you smoke, you're twice as likely to get macular degeneration and get it younger and get a more serious version of it. So that's really important. The other thing is to have a really healthy diet and lifestyle, eating plenty of green leafy vegetables and fresh fruit. And these things can be discussed with your GP and a nutritionist if you see one. But it's very important that your food is fresh and healthy.
And tell me, Dr. Peter Davies, I've heard optometrists say that you can look into the eye and the eye tends to mirror the way the cardiovascular system is throughout the entire body. Is that necessarily true?
It is true. When you look at the back of the eye, you directly see blood vessels, and blood vessels are part of the cardiovascular system. Now, actually, in our day, GPs do a very good job managing things like high blood pressure and high cholesterol. So as eye doctors, we don't see as much change in the back of the eye from high blood pressure and high cholesterol. We do occasionally, but nothing like we used to see. But diabetes attacks blood vessels, and that's why all diabetics need eye checks, because we can literally look into the eye and we can see the changes in the blood vessels, and that gives us an idea of what's going on elsewhere in the body.
Now, I myself had a macular check about a year or two ago, and they took a photo of it and they said it looked like a textbook macula at the moment. My dad does have some macular degeneration. He's in his 80s now. How often should I get my macula checked?
If you're over 50, you should see your optometrist every 2 years, because 1 in 7 people over the age of 50 have some signs of ageing at the back of the eyes. Once you get over 65, you probably should see the optometrist every year. The optometrist is the best person to see because they have good quality cameras and their practices are set up to be able to screen you for eye disease such as macular degeneration. Here where I work at Newcastle Eye Hospital, our job is we treat you. So if there's a problem there that the optometrist is concerned about, that's when we step in.
What if you do have other complicating issues? Like myself, I have some glaucoma going on. Does that necessarily affect the macula or not?
Glaucoma, there are different glaucomas. There's actually many types of glaucomas, but the one we most often talk about is when there is raised pressure in the eye, and that increased pressure has an effect on the optic nerve. Where the optic nerve inserts into the back of the eyeball, again, thinking of our golf ball that we have, the nerve is vulnerable because it's difficult to get a good blood supply to the optic nerve. So when the pressure goes up, that's where we tend to see the damage at the head of the optic nerve at the back of the eye. So glaucoma doesn't usually affect the macula. In very, very severe cases of glaucoma, the macula becomes affected. But usually glaucoma affects your peripheral vision first. Now, patients aren't going to notice loss of their peripheral vision, and that's why it's very, very important that everybody is seeing an optometrist to look for changes of eye disease, such as glaucoma, because patients aren't going to notice loss of their peripheral vision, but they will notice loss of central vision, and that's something that we can talk about, how to monitor your eyes.
And Dr. Peter Davies, what's the first thing someone can do is having listened to this and going, well, maybe I should check out the macula, maybe not. You're just saying a simple optometrist visit, hey?
Yes, but there's one thing that they can do that's even simpler. And what I'd like all your listeners to do whilst they're listening to me talking right now is pick up their right hand, and with the palm of their hand, I want them to cover their right eye. And I want them to look out of their left eye only. In other words, I'm asking people to test their vision one eye at a time. Because what happens in my practice is so often patients come to me with macular degeneration that they haven't been aware of, because the brain is very good at tricking you. So one eye could be losing vision and you're not noticing it, you're not aware of it. So I want all your listeners right now, cover that right eye and check the vision in the left eye. Does it seem normal? Does it seem right? Once they cover the right eye, I want them to swap. Pick up your left hand, cover your left eye, and check your eyes individually. And if patients did that every week or every 2 weeks, I think that we would detect macular disease far sooner than we currently do in the Hunter Valley, and that means I would be getting to treat people earlier than I'm currently getting to treat them, and we would get better overall visual results.
And if you think you are noticing a difference, then you go to the optometrist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Straight away. If you notice reduced vision in either eye, you don't wait for the next available appointment. You go and pick up the phone, you knock on the door, and you get seen immediately. As a retinal surgeon, one of the surgeries I do is I can drain the blood. If there's any bleeding at the back of the eye, I can drain that blood away from the macula. But patients have to see me within a day or two of the hemorrhage occurring. Okay, that's why it's so important that people present straight away.
Look, thank you very much for your time, Dr. Peter Davies, and roll on that increased DNA research.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you, Fred the cat, hello, who gave up his cat post so I could set my microphone on top of that. He's just in my arms at the moment. Are you going to say meow to the listeners, Fred? Never work with children and animals. All right, I'll put you down. Off you go, go on. There he goes. Oh, we got a meow. I wonder if you heard that. He's walking away. He's most upset. I think he wants his cat post back. It's all right, you'll get it back in a minute. Coming up on the Skeptic Zone in the coming weeks, even more interviews from Eran Segev at the QED conference in Manchester. And I think in a couple of weeks I'm going to pop back up to the Blue Mountains for a magic festival. I think Joe Alabaster, Peter Bowditch and I might be wandering around seeing what we can find there. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off with Fred the cat, off to get some water or something from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.